Hi there, and welcome to the 43rd episode of Career Stories Live. So today I am joined by Neil Smith, who is retailer, buyer and writer. So hi Neil, thanks for joining.
Hiya. I'm delighted, terrified, as I said, but delighted.
It's all going to be good. Okay, so Neil and I met in a membership group for people who want to write a bit more and kind of get better writing. So it's the GDI, which is called the Goddamn Inspiration, facilitated by Joe Watson. And I said here it's both an incredibly supportive and incredibly sarcastic community. So I think that pretty much sums it up for me. But Neil has got an answer for pretty much every question that comes out of that group, whether it's about writing or not. So that's why I thought he's going to be an excellent guest. So anyone that's watching, please do comment to let us know that you're here, where you're joining from. Feel free to ask any questions or share your experience in the comments. And if you're watching on replay, obviously do that as well. Just a little bit of background for the lives for anyone that's watching that hasn't before. So I've always been really interested in learning about people's careers, what they do, why they do it. Just a bit nosy, really. So the idea is to inspire thought about what people could do and get my guests to give advice on places to source information. So I've always had some really, really good advice from my guests, and I'm sure that will be the case today. So let's get started. So Neil, can you just give us a brief intro to you and what it is you're doing work-wise right now?
I work for a shop in a small town, large village, small town in Ireland, not that far from Dublin, and it's in the outdoor business. And that has been my home business since I was a kid, really, since I was 11. And I buy stock for the shop, I sell it to customers, I complain about it not arriving on time, and everything relevant to that. I also write. I write content for people's websites. I write fiction for myself, and hopefully one day fiction for a paying audience. Of course, that's the publishers will one day recognize my wonderfulness and decide to shower me with glory, and I live in hope. And I am trying to combine the two and do the best I can on that one. Really.
Excellent. So how's that going? Are you able to kind of allocate certain time for certain bits, or?
Only theoretically. What happens is I have all the time in the world to do the things I want to do when it's winter time and work in the shop is quieter, and then in summertime everything goes mental and it all goes on the long finger. And the biggest problem of it all is just my habit of procrastination. So everything gets put on the long finger until the last second, and then I dive into frenzied action like I've just sat on a cactus and that kind of works, sort of. And I am hoping to grow up and grow out of that in the not too distant future and become much more organized so that I can have more time and less hassle. I live in hope.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I definitely work best to deadlines as well. And if you don't have any, I find that really, really hard. I really definitely wait till the last minute.
Oh, the word, don't ever say to someone, oh, there's no rush for that. Because there absolutely is no rush for that at all. If you don't care, I certainly don't care.
Yeah.
Come back to me when there's a rush.
Yeah. And if it's yesterday, that's cool.
I work like that. That's all good.
Okay, so early careers. Did you have a job whilst you were at school or college? And if so, has that helped you in any way?
Yes, through all of that, it has. My first job, I would have been 10 or 11. Actually younger than that, because I had a paper round with my family for a long time before that. But my first job, which didn't involve my family paying me to deliver newspapers, was when a development company, Barrett, built a new timeshare and golf course development in Aviemore, the village in Scotland I'm from. And I and all the other local primary school kids spent the summer wandering around on our hands, literally on our hands and knees with a long screwdriver, tapping this newly laid fairway for stones to try and clear the fairway of any random stones that were left there. After the first 2 weeks, all the no-hopers were let go and the rest of us got paid more. So we went from 70 pence an hour, which was riches beyond my wildest dreams, to 85 pence an hour, which was just unbelievable. And to put that into context, I suppose 70 pence at the time would have bought something like 2 gallons of petrol.
Wow.
So it was like remarkably large amounts of money for a 10-year-old to be handed. And so myself and my good friend Stephen went up and down fairways for the summer holidays, talking about cowboy movies with never-ending gun magazines and the ability to fire 40 shots out of a single 6-shot pistol, and similar highbrow conversations, whilst filling baskets of pebbles. And it was great crack. And that was my first one. The year after that, I went to high school and I got a job in a place which rented bikes in the summer and did cross-country skiing in the winter. And that was kind of where everything went badly downhill from there, because I got very addicted both to cycling and to skiing. And I worked there through the winters, through the summer holidays, and I worked weekends through the rest of the year. And I went from the boy who worked in the shop, who was the gopher who did the fixing of the bikes and the sweeping up of things, and eventually I became a senior instructor once I was long out of school and had the ability to work importing equipment for skiing from places like Norway, dealing with customs and all the kind of busy trade stuff that goes with that, and the random, like, your cargo has been delivered to the UK, and I'm thinking, great, I'll nip over to Aberdeen to get it, and then it turns out it's Immingham, which is a dock at the other end of the country, and so just an hour and a half it's just, there's a difference. So these little things were an interesting learning curve for someone who was pretty young at the time. And at the same time, I always thought, I'm being paid to go skiing, so can't beat that, really. At that time, that was a big deal to me, and I'm still,
I'm sure.
I should say.
Yeah, who wouldn't love that?
So yes, that's where I started.
So 10 or 11, that's incredibly young. Was that normal in Scotland for kids at that age to be employed?
Well, yeah. I mean, when the golf course thing came along, it was like school time. There must have been like 100 kids there for the first 2 weeks anyway, and then it was about half that. So it was not that unusual at the time. Now, obviously, times have changed, and we are no longer allowed to send people like me up chimneys and stuff, which is desperately difficult. But no, nobody batted an eyelid. And I'd say all the parents in the village whose kids were gainfully employed went, there are no summer camps to care about. There's no anything. It's like, there's no childcare, there's no nothing. It was a feral existence. You had your breakfast, you left the house, you came back when you were hungry or when it got dark. And if you had just been paid, and I can't remember how much I got paid, but it would have been like £25 a week or something maybe. Once you got handed the traditional brown envelope stuffed with cash and the little window in it, which is very much a museum piece now. You wouldn't necessarily go home for food even, because now you could go to the chip shop or you could buy your own stuff. And we did. Wow. We lived on chips for the summer.
That's so cool. Yeah, wow, there you go. So, okay, so moving on from that then, that's really interesting. Your degree was in outdoor education in the community. So how did you decide? Well, I'm guessing you decided on that because you loved skiing and cycling so much, but
So I had left school a bit lost, really. I was a bit angry and a bit clueless and a bit lost, and I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anything to guide me, and I had a love of the mountains and skiing. I had a desire to travel, a desire to get away from the small village in the Highlands that I grew up in, almost pathologically, I suspect. And I had music, and I didn't really know what else to do. And so I left, and I just went away, and I traveled a lot. And I hitchhiked all over Europe, and I went to North Africa, and I got dumped out of trucks in very odd places sometimes, and I would look around, and sometimes that worked out really well, sometimes not so well, and sometimes you luck into finding something to do while you got to wherever it was you were. And then I went to the US and I traveled around and lived in the US for a long time, whether I was allowed to or not at that point. And then ultimately, I had done that for a few years and in truth didn't really know what I was doing still. It was still a laugh. It was still fun. I still had hair, the future was open. Some of the people I worked with had done a degree in Jordan Hill College in Glasgow that was sport and community. So it was basically kind of social work with activities.
Okay.
You could then tack on a degree, postgraduate certificate in teaching after that. Right. And so I signed up for the current version of that. So the original sports degree had split into three. There was a community arts section, a traditional sports section, and there was an outdoor education section. And it just seemed like an amazing deal for me. It wasn't, actually. It turned out it was a pretty poor quality course. And I think a lot of people on it look back on it as an opportunity missed or not as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
We were the last year that got student grants. And I think if I had been paying out money to go and do this course, I would have been spitting bullets at the end of it.
Right.
But, we did our time. I graduated. It was fine. I did all the things that needed to be done, even if my enthusiasm, as did lots of other people's, it waned over the time. But it seemed like a good thing to get into. And you leave this and go to work with people who had problems with drug addiction, who had problems with constantly stealing things that they saw because they needed to feed their drug addiction, and so on and so on. And that was that's quite a hard field to do for any amount of time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do that for a very short time and then either just leave entirely, which was what I did, or try to get into management where they're not in frontline work, where they're not really dealing with dangerous people who are on serious drugs at the time.
Yeah.
And so, having done years at university, then I found myself pretty much back where I started.
Yeah.
I traveled some more, and I did think about a few things. And I decided I was good at the outdoor business. I was good at the business of when people walk into a shop, how do those jackets on an outdoor shop get there? How do you choose the boots? How do you find the skis? How do you do all that stuff? And I was good at that, and I got more into that. I started writing mail order catalogs for specialist retailers, my employer first and foremost. And then I started offering that work to other people. So I got very good at 2-line descriptions for things on pages and in the pre-internet era. But it has those skills transfer beautifully, even if the paper is no longer there. And I continued being a ski instructor. I moved into the revamped company that I used to work for as a kid, and I became at one point the senior instructor there. And that was very enjoyable, but it got old, and I just reached a point where I didn't know what I was doing. I was turning up, passing time, and skiing was still good, and there was nothing wrong with life, but it wasn't really doing it for me anymore. So I just decided to leave, and I came to Ireland for 6 months, and that was 25 years ago. And I've spent most of my time here since. It's been a long 6 months.
Yeah.
And why did I stop instructing? There were a couple of things that had happened that made me realize if things went wrong, the person on the ground, the instructor, was going to be blamed for everything. And the money wasn't good enough. Like if I got to a stage where somebody had a bad accident and was badly injured or killed, I wasn't going to be able to sit back and say, well, that's really terrible, but at least I have a 6-figure sum of money to tide me over for the next 30 years or something. It was something that was bothering. There was there was a chap who died in the French Alps when he was being guided up a classic North Face route, and it led to a long drawn out court case. And that preyed on my mind a little bit, because in my mind, climbing is a risk sport, and if you go into that, well, bad things happen to climbers throughout history. Bad things have happened to climbers.
Yes.
And the idea that you can start suing for it when someone just makes a judgment call, which that guide clearly did, good or bad. It turns out it was bad, but you judge, you make a decision based on being there.
What you know,
And so it wasn't paid amazingly well. The responsibility was really quite high. And looking around, the trouble with Scotland at that point was that the weather was highly unreliable. And now ski areas all across the world are getting used to this, and winter mountain areas are getting used to this. The weather is unreliable and getting more so. And if you are banking on paying this month's rent and it doesn't snow, well, you don't have your rent or dinner or anything. So I certainly wasn't the worst. I was certainly more financially settled than many in the business. But I just felt there was something better, and I just stopped being satisfied doing the same old.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I guess it's the same now, isn't it? You do it for a while, and then you start to, with age and experience, understand the risks a bit more and the impact that's going to have on you and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah,
for sure.
So you mentioned quite often in our GDI chat about some of the random small towns you've lived and worked in. So have you got any couple of stories you can throw in about some of the
no stories, nothing. It's all I went to the US in the 80s, mid 80s, and I was unashamedly chasing a woman and adventure. Both. I had a desire to wake up in strange places with strange people and do strange things in a whole different country. And the US, for me growing up, the US was that shining beacon of amazingness. You saw it on the cinema screen on a regular basis. I kind of probably grew through some of the most legendary high school kids movie, the whole John Hughes movie series that came out, all of the kind of Breakfast Club era of films. And this was just like, this is where I wanted to be. I wanted to walk down the street and run into someone like Ferris Bueller, not Hamish McPherson, Ferris sodding Bueller. I wanted to meet somebody exciting and interesting who drove cars, who wore suits, people who were like cool, and people who were not like me at all. I also kind of wanted to meet people who didn't know me. And it seemed like having the Atlantic between me and my home country would be a good start in that. And it worked out. So I went to the States with literally nothing. I remember turning up at the border at one point, having flown into Toronto. This was not my first, and I had a £10 note on me. That was all the money I had. And it was useless because it was a Clydesdale Bank Scottish £10 note. And there wasn't a bank in the country would even change that small amount. And so I made stuff up and lied and blagged it and pretended to have money and friends and influence, and somehow it all seemed to work. And I went around doing different things. My first way of raising money in the States was when I was in Michigan, and I collected bottles and cans at 10 cents a cup. This was from people's back gardens in a town called East Lansing, which was a university town. And a lot of people who go to university in the States have a lot of money because university is very expensive and they don't clear up after themselves. And so I could turn up with a series of bin bags, clear their backyard after a big party at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, take it down to the shop and turn that into a significant amount of money sometimes. And that was just enough to keep me going for a long time. And I was in East Lansing because my then girlfriend, the woman I had run off to meet in America, was a student there. And so I got to know Detroit. I got to know where she was from initially. I met lots of people in that area, and I Loved it. I absolutely loved it. I would go to the supermarket at 4 a.m. because I could, because it was open.
Yeah.
I would wander around looking at the rifles on the wall of the supermarket, which was like bonkers. And it's still bonkers. It's not any less bonkers now with
Yeah.
age. But it was so strange at the time. And I drove this knackered old car that she had, this Chevrolet Citation with like a 2.8 engine that would do 60 miles an hour on a good day downhill. And it was just so American. It was like big and heavy and crap. And it was perfect. And I loved that. Loved all that
living the
stuff.
dream, totally.
And it was marvelous. And so I got to move around and I met people and I traveled. And I moved out eventually to a town north of Seattle, and I worked at the harbour there for a while, launching boats. And again, I didn't look brown skinned, so nobody asked if I was entitled to work there, and I just got a job and I was launching boats, which of course I'd never done before, but I figured, how hard can it be? And it turns out it's not that hard. If you don't do stupid stuff, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
And that was kind of fun. I liked that for a bit. I got a job on a fishing boat further north, where the guy who owned the boat would go out for the night. His crew would catch fish, gut fish, clean them, put them on ice, and when they got back into the harbour, they were pretty much pre-sold, and so hotels, restaurants from the local town would come in and grab these boxes of ready-to-go fish for the day. And my job for about 2 months was to sharpen knives, because the guys who were fishing were taking in lines. This was all line caught fish. They're taking fish off lines, you're chucking them down. The guys who were gutting them are going through knives pretty sharply, and they'd literally throw the knives at me with the phrase, "Come on, Scotty, get a move on." Because wherever you go in North America, if you're from Scotland, you could be called Sebastian and you're still getting called Scott. And I would sharpen knives on this, sitting on a box, upturned box, and with a treadled belt sander, and I would sharpen knives and pass them back to them. I didn't get to throw the knives back at them. They get to throw the knives at me.
Excellent.
And that was hard work. Sitting in the bottom of the boat with all these like lumps of fish and water swirling around your feet, bits of fish, and it was brutally hard work. And after the first week, when I thought they were going to fire me, because I thought, I must be terrible because these guys keep slagging me. After the first week, they kept me on, and the money was amazing. And so that 2-month period basically funded me forever and a day. I was like, I could keep my costs down and live for months on what I earned on that. And because I smelled so incredibly badly of fish guts, there was no need to purchase contraception of any kind, because nobody came near me. It was awful. It was literally possible to clear a room, I'd say. You could walk in, and there was no shower that would take that off. There was no Head and Shoulders that would remove it from your hair. It was very, very, very tactile as smells go. It was quite fun. And that was good, and it paid well. Most of the time when I did jobs, I would turn up and I was happy to do the crap work, the smelly, horrible jobs that people didn't want to do, or the basic jobs. And sometimes it was fun and sometimes it wasn't fun. And it all had the advantage of prolonging the adventure. And that's kind of what I was mostly. I wanted the adventure to carry on longer. And not many. So that was cleaning toilets. Hey, look, here's a toilet. I'll clean that. Step aside. It's all good. And
so amazing confidence, though, to be able to just go out and find those kind of jobs, or any jobs.
I never felt confident. Even today, I don't feel confident. Like I say, I started out very lost and upset about everything in life, and then I ended up a bit lost and uncertain about things in life. I was never particularly confident, but what I learned to do was hide that.
Right. Okay.
And sound more confident than I was. And I don't know how or why. It just worked. And
Yeah.
sometimes you'd fall into things because someone who knew you knew someone else who was looking for someone to do something. And
Yeah.
I got a job like that on a dude ranch where I was pretending to be a cowboy for a couple of weeks, three or 4 weeks, and I wandered around with a 6-gun and a rifle in my horse's holster. I pretended I knew what I was doing. Because I'd seen a horse before, I reckoned I could ride a horse. And after the first few days, when I saw the guests who arrived, I realized I could ride a horse because these guys couldn't, and couldn't tell if I couldn't. So it didn't really matter. And that was great crack. Because on Thursdays, you'd have like a shootout. I'd get shot and fall backwards off a roof into a big pile of mattresses and cardboard boxes. And Tuesdays, you'd be like sleeping out around a campfire, and it was like very blazing saddles. It was great. And there was branding of cattle, which you had to do very carefully and not very realistically. But again, the people who were coming on these trips were like stockbrokers from New York and film producers from Los Angeles. They wouldn't know a cow from a hole in the road. And the trick was to brand them very, very lightly so that the hair singed and you could see the mark, but it would grow out in a couple of weeks and you could use them for another group, a couple of weeks down the line. And if you had to, you could run some clippers across the hair. And the cows didn't mind because they were so docile. They were like trained performers and they loved it. So,
Yeah.
so those are silly jobs.
Yeah, but it all comes back to networking, doesn't it? And I know everyone hates that word, but kind of it's about who you know and who's going to recommend you in and all of that. So whichever work you're going to do, it's so important to talk to people.
And sometimes you have to, and I'm not a networker. If I go to a BNI networking event, I'm the guy hiding under the table, eating buns, hoping it all goes away. Yeah. Because I'm not a natural net. I am the guy in the corner of the party.
Yeah.
Staring at the carpet, and then I'm leaving. But I can make stuff happen. But I like people generally. I know people who know me would be like you.
Yeah.
But I like people. And I'm interested in what people are doing, and I'm happy to go up and say, hey, how is this? Show me how that works. Do you need someone else to do that? And there are lots of ways to be, you can be born to networks, you can learn how to do networks, and you can join networks. And I very much learned how to do it. And I'm not sure how good you need to be sometimes, but it has worked out reasonably well in my particular case, I suppose.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so moving on to advice. So have you got any advice for people that are maybe leaving school or university and want to start working in the outdoor industry?
I would work in the outdoor industry before going to university.
Okay.
I think I would say to those people, take time off, go and do something, come back with a skill. And then once you've done this, for whether you've been a ski instructor, whether you've been a climber, whether you've been someone who polishes walking boots in a rental center in Annecy in France or something, I don't know, but go out and do something. And when you come to university, you'll have a much, much greater idea of what you want to do and why you want to do it. And that will be based on a reality. It's very easy to choose a course based on nothing but what someone in school says. This is what you should be doing. So you can, if you want to get into things like manufacture and design of climbing equipment, for instance, climbing hardware, do engineering with an emphasis on metal science, metal skills, metallurgy, because lots of climbers think they can work for companies who make carabiners, who make harnesses, and the reality is they don't need climbers, they need engineers. You can be an engineer who goes climbing. And the other thing I'd say is, if you want to get into the outdoors, ski resorts always need accountants. Ski resorts always need engineers. Ski resorts always need lawyers. And you don't have to do an outdoor-based course to be in the outdoors. You can do all manner of things which are relevant. I often joke, and it's not really a joke, I often joke that if I was going back in time and I was in Chamonix, I wouldn't be a ski instructor. at 18 or 17, wandering around like a big Egypt with my hair all over the place, I would be a bin man, because there were lots of Brits working as a bin man in Chamonix. They worked for the local council. They got paid well. Their job was done by 10 in the morning, and then they'd go skiing or climbing.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to spend their day dealing with clients. So a lot of ski instructors spend a lot of time, especially when you're young and new and you're the new boy and you get the grunt work. So you get first day beginners for a year, and you spend half your working life standing on a patch of snow, going nowhere, stepping sideways up and down a hill, doing the same basic snowplow stuff. Whereas if you're a bin man and it's 11:30 in the morning and you're free to go, you can just spend your day skiing around like a loon. So you have to ask, do you like the teaching aspect of it? Do you like the instructing aspect of it?
Yeah.
Don't. If that's just a means to more skiing, then go do something else. Become the accountant who doesn't open the office till 4 in the afternoon and works through till 10.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. I know I did a running leader thing, and I was teaching people to run or helping people to run. And actually, I quickly thought, this now means that I can't actually do the runs that I want to do because I'm out all day with other people.
Yeah.
So
you spend your time standing around looking at other people doing it. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
It's important that you don't get too tunnel visioned about this. It's important to just keep your eyes open on the opportunities slightly off to the side, because there are plenty of them.
Yeah. We've just got a comment through from Nikki saying ski resorts always need accountants. Awesome advice. I agree totally. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. So thank you for that.
From Nikki.
Yeah, from Nikki. There you go. Okay, and just finally about writing. So any advice for people that want to make writing part or all of their role?
Again, I'm not convinced I am the elite writer that anyone wants to be taking advice from, but my first thing I'd say was get some experience in life. I started writing because I was lost. I started writing trying to make sense of where I was in life at any given time. One of the things about the life I've led is there have been incredible highs, and they have been matched step for step, often along the way, with incredible lows. And I have often in the past found myself stuck at the metaphorical equivalent of South Loom services at 4 in the morning, and I'm sitting in the dark with a crappy, expensive coffee, scribbling in a notebook, putting down thoughts and feelings. And some people are very good at feelings, and some people are very good at organizing their thoughts, and I am neither. And so writing became a thing I did for me. And because it became a thing I did for me, it didn't occur to me that there was anything else I could do with it. And then I started using it to do sales. I was good at sales. I had a knack for sales. And then I found that I also had a knack for sales written down. And I could put things in a catalog within the constrictions of space available for a particular item, and it would make sense. And it made for a fairly profitable business at that time. And then I started transferring that to websites, and I knew my subject inside out. And I am starting to understand that that's not required, but it did me no harm. So I think if you're going to write, you should know something about something.
Yeah. And
you can apply those lessons. And I am now writing about things I don't really know much about. I had a gig about cars and motor servicing. And whilst I like cars, I am no petrol head by any means. And that was both challenging and an absolute joy. It was an education, and I loved learning something about something that I didn't realize how much I didn't know. And now I realize I know tons more than I did, and it's still nothing in the big field. Every field has their people who knows everything, and it's hard to come in from the outside. But having been good at something helps. And so get good at something. Have a life and then write about your life.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Okay, so we're about out of time. So thank you to Neil for joining me today. Hopefully it hasn't been as terrifying as you expected.
Oh, no, it's terrifying. I look calm and rational, but
you do. You look very calm. Yeah. Okay, so anyone that's been watching and wants to ask questions later, please do so. And if you're watching on replay, same thing, ask any questions and we'll come back to them. So I am back the week after next, actually 2nd of May, talking to Andy Goldman, who's another member of the GDI group, and he is the copywriting physio. So look forward to talking to him. So thanks again, Neil, and
No trouble at all.
see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for having me.